Hello. So, good day. So, today we want to discuss business valuation. So, it's going to be an add-on to what we have been discussing earlier. And just going to share my screen with you. So, you give me some time for this icon to be active here. And let me see. Share my screen with you so we can actually see how we do business valuation. So it's going to be an add-on, as I earlier said, it's going to be um, add-on to what you have been discussing earlier. So if you can remember vividly, we started from, so I can share my screen now because this is active. Okay, yes, so my screen is in sharing mode now. So now I believe you can see what we have here. Okay. Now, if you see what we have here, you observe that we actually started from the trial balance. We were able to build our three statements. We were able to, we have assumptions, the basis on which we did the forecast of the financial statements. Okay. And right now, you can see, based on what we have, that we actually want to create um, evaluation, a business evaluation model. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is I'm going to take you back to the financial statement here. It's not this. So let me hide this so we don't keep on getting confused. So FS1 here is what we want to deal with. Now, if you look at it here, you will see that it's already built here. So what I'm just going to do is to take all this out, right? So I'm just going to take all this out so we can build everything from start to finish. Exactly. So what we have here is a blank page and see the business valuation. So that's what we want to achieve right now. The first thing is why do we need to value a business? So we need to value a business for several reasons. Number one is when there is a kind of a merger and acquisition deal, the merging company, we need to determine the value of the merging company. Or if investors want to invest in the business, they need to determine the value of that business and they need to know the impact of how the invested funds will affect the value of the business. So they need to know the value of the business as it is and what the impact of the invested funds will be on the value of the business. Likewise, if you want to obtain loan from the bank may need to get evaluation reports of the business. So there are several reasons why a business needs to be valued. And one of the key reasons, of course, is always because of investors' interest. Investors' interest in the sense that investors who wants to invest in your business would like to know what the value of your business is as at the time of the investment. Okay, and they will also want to simulate a situation of knowing more like a scenario analysis to know what the value of the business is if if they are either investing funds into the business either by cash or by equity. So that's um, that's part of the reasons why we have to value a business. All right. Now, when we talk about business valuation, just like asset valuation, we use the discount cash flow approach. So there are different approaches for valuing a business, but the approach we want to talk about here, which is of course even the most common, is the DCF approach. So the first thing is we need to calculate the free cash flow to the firm. So the free cash flow to the firm is the cash that is available to the business. So the cash that is available to the business that is not being used to pay suppliers, is not being used to pay tax or whatever obligations the company has, or the cash, the value that the business actually generates in terms of cash is the free cash flow. It is free in the sense that it is not to be used to offset any obligations or whatsoever. It is free to the firm. It is what the firm generates as a value, as a cash value. So that's why it's free because it's not exposed All right, so that's why it's called free cash flow. So it is this free cash flow that we have to discount. So when we discount this free cash flow for the present value, we have what we call the enterprise value. So we have what we call the enterprise value. Now, the enterprise value must be adjusted for. So we have to adjust for the enterprise value by looking at the cash we had in the immediate prior historical year, and looking at the debt of the business in the immediate prior historical year. So what we have to do is to add up the cash of the business in the immediate prior historical year, and we remove or we deduct the debt in the business in the immediate prior historical year. So whatever balance we have left becomes our equity value. Whatever balance you have left becomes what? Our equity value. So the difference between enterprise value and equity value is just in terms of adjustment for cash and debt. So let's quickly go to the business of the day so you can understand fully what I'm talking about. I've explained to you the fact that for the valuation of business, what we use is the free cash flow. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to type free cash flow, FCFF, that's the free cash flow to, okay? All right, so the first thing we're going to do is to find our change in working capital. Now, when you are dealing with your change in working capital, your change in working capital is going to, of course, be all the changes in working capital except, I'll repeat, all the change in working capital except for cash and short-term debt. All changes in working capital except for cash and short-term debt. And the reason why we are saying except for cash and short-term debt is because cash and short-term debt will have to be adjusted for. So we adjust for cash and short-term debt. Besides, cash and short-term debt are also they are cash flow in themselves. So we don't have to include this in our change in working capital. So that is basically the two reasons why we are not including cash and short-term debt. So what we have to do now is we have to go and pick all the items that will make up the change in working. So we have to go and pick all the items that will make up the change in working capital. So the first thing is, of course, we can go to our balance sheet and just, oh no, not balance sheet this time, cash flow statement, okay? And just come and pick basically all the items you have here, all right? So inventory, account receivable, other current assets, account payable, deferred income tax, other current liabilities. So we're going to stop at other current liabilities because other non-current liabilities is not part of working capital. So these are the working capital that we have. Okay, these are asset, liability, deferred income tax, because it will be deferred income tax asset or deferred income tax liability. So current liabilities. So we pick all this, right? So we can pick all that and come to where we have our change in working capital, then we paste. Exactly. So to do that, we paste. Okay. The faster way we can also do this is this could be better because this stuff are actually arranged, right? So they're actually well arranged. So you can just pick this and just take this down, just link them up like that. Fine. Okay. So now what we're going to do next, of course, is we're going to get our period. We're going to have to look at our period. So for change in working capital, the first change, of course, for between 1999 and 2000 will be in year 2000, right? So what we're going to do is just to say equals to, right? So we'll go and pick the change in working capital in year 2000. Can you see? So we have it. I'll press enter. All right. So to do that, You can drag this like this, exactly. So you see what we have there. So immediately you do that, you can just highlight everything here and take it down. So this is what we have. So now remember, the free cash flow model has different formula that can be used. All right. So the formula we're going to apply, of course, the formula we're going to apply here is we'll simply apply the free cash flow to 10, which is equal to, you're going to have your change in working capital, right? So you change in working capital, then plus your what we call your net income, or you can see your net income first plus your change in working capital, right? Now plus the depreciation and what's depreciation and amortization. So you have depreciation and amortization, then you subtract your capex. So you subtract your capex, and finally you come and add your interest. Come and add your interest, of course, which is going to be adjusted for tax, because it's tax interest, which is tax deductible. So that's why we are having that 1 minus C there. All right, so based on this formula, we've been able to have our change in working capital. So the change in working capital is going to be the sum. When you take this, add all of this up at the top there. So you can take this and drag here. Fine. Okay, so the next thing, of course, is our net income. So to pick your net income, now for your net income, of course, we've already calculated our net income. We've calculated our net income here. So these are our net income. All right, so we have our net income there. We can just take it down. So we've dealt with this. So we have our depreciation and amortization. Check if I'm still online. Okay, so we have our depreciation and amortization. Of course, depreciation and amortization, we have to go and pick that as well in our income statement. So depreciation and amortization is going to be picked in the income statement. Now remember, we are adding back depreciation and amortization, so we can have negative effect of this to add back. Yeah. So the next is our capex. All right. So our capex will be gotten or can be gotten from our cash flow statement. So when you go to your cash flow statement, see where you have your capex, right? So additions to PP and E is it, additions to investment, other non-current assets. So both of these makes up our capex, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say this, right? So first of all, open a bracket and say this plus, or better still, it's faster to just pick the cash flow from investing activity. Yes. So we pick that one, we can take it there. All right. So that's what we have for capex. Now, the next thing that we would do based on the formula that we have here is the interest. Okay. So the next thing we have to do is to calculate the interest. So how do we go about that? So if you look at it, the interest. So let's go to the income statement. Now, in the income statement here, we have net interest. We have the net interest expense, right? So in the net interest expense, these are the values that we have. But the net interest expense is the difference between the interest income and the interest expense. Now, meanwhile, we are not going to look at the net interest expense because we are not factoring in interest income here. What we are bringing in is solely interest expense and not net interest expense. Because in net interest expense, we have removed interest expense from interest income. All right, so the difference between interest expense and interest income, this was the net interest expense. But in this case, what we just want is the interest expense. So if you look at the assumption, you see that in the assumption, we were told what the interest expense is. The interest expense is for STD, all right, which is short-term debt, is calculated based on average balance and interest rate specified later. Based on average balance and interest rate specified later. So you look further in the assumption, you will see that we were told that interest on short-term debt is 7% based on economic forecast. So you have to note down somewhere here. I think we have that assumption here. So 7%, right? So let me give it this color. Okay. So 7% based on economic forecast. Now, interest on long-term debt, rates embedded in existing debts. Okay, rates embedded in existing debt. Annual expense 13.5. So it's going to be 7% of short-term debt. Our interest expense is going to be 7% of short-term debt, right? Plus the annual expense for long-term debt, which is constant at 13.5, which is constant at 13.5 million. Okay, so that's fine. So what we're going to do is here I can decide to have the 13.5. Okay, simply written there. All right. So for the interest expense now, for the historical period, of course, for the historical period, which is from 2000, actually from 1999 to 2002, but here we are looking at it from 2000 to 2002, based on the fact that it's a change in working capital that actually made us to start from 2000, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to pick the historical period. So for the historical period, okay, it is 13.7. So this is given, all right. So it's for the forecast period. We now have to ensure that whatever we are doing is based on the actual interest. But this is actually given in the trial balance. So we can pick this to assume that, of course, that is the interest expense we have for that period. So I can then take this up to this level. Okay. Now, but for this, we have to factor in the fact that we are dealing with just interest expense. Okay, we are dealing with just interest expense. So we have this short-term debt. So what we're going to do is to open a bracket and say this times there's a short-term debt in the what's it called? Short-term debt in the balance sheet. Okay, for the forecast period, which we are going to pick here. All right, and of course we're going to fix this. Why is my function not working? Okay, so we're going to fix this by having $sign here. Okay, so this is fixed, but we are not going to stop there. We are going to say plus, right? So we have 13.5 here, of course, which is also going to be fixed. Exactly. So that's what we have. Okay. So you can see it's quite straightforward. I can double click it again. So we are picking this, fixing it, picking this, fixing it, multiplying the two, which is fixed, by the short-term debt. Okay, so multiplying the two by the short-term debt. So we already assumed this is 13.5, which is long-term. 7% times short-term debt is short-term interest expense. So the two addition of the two gives us the interest expense. Okay, so we can drag this like this. So this is what we have. Now the next thing is, of course, we have the 1 minus the tax, 1 minus the tax rate. Okay, so 1 minus the tax rate. So we have been given the tax rate in the assumption as what, 35%, isn't it? So 1 minus the tax rate is going to give us 65%, which is 0.6. Let's just say 65%. So 1 minus 65% is 65%. So we can take this down. Yeah. So but it's always better to use the formula instead of just 1 minus. So it's better I do it this way. I'll come and pick this, then I come and fix that, and then drag. So this is always better because at any point in time, I may want to change this tax rate. So for instance, if I change this tax rate to 40%, so it changes this. So that is why it's always better to link instead of coding. Okay. So that's the beauty of financial modeling. You have to make sure anything that can be linked is linked. That's why it's a model. If you're not linking, then it's not a model. Okay. All right. So now the last is then to get your interest times your 1 minus tax, because interest is tax deductible. So that's why we're having 1 minus tax. So here is going to be this times 65%. Okay. So this will be that times what? Times 65%. We can take this. Forward. Okay, so take that forward. We have something like this. We have something like this. Okay, so if we look at something is coming up to me here, let me say something. So if we look at the, what's it called? If we look at the trial balance, so the trial balance actually has interests and income separately. So what it then means is that what we have here is net interest, which we picked directly from the income statement. Okay, obviously that is wrong. Okay, so that just struck me now. That is wrong because what we have here is basically just interest expense. We are not going to be using net interest. We are using interest expense. So we can pick this up straight up from the trial balance. Okay, because the trial balance is actually separated, right? So trial balance for 2000, interest expense in year 2000, interest expense is 15.1. So it's better you just pick it up straight from here, 15.1, right? Now interest expense for 2001 is 20.5, right? Interest expense for 2002 is 23.7. So this makes sense because now we are actually using the interest expense for the historical year, and we're also using interest expense for the forecast period, not interest income. Okay, at the end of the day, we adjusted for interest for tax rate because interest is tax deductible. You understand? So when the taxman was to tax you. Okay, they allow for interest expense. So interest expense will have to be taken out of your profit before tax, before they arrive as your what's it called, your accessible profits. Okay, so so that is it. Now we can finally then calculate the free cash flow to the firm. We have it at the top here. So we have it at the top there, but we're still gonna, it's better we have it here, right? So because finally we'll do something here at the last column, which is year 2007, the terminal forecast here. We're going to calculate what we call the terminal value, TV. So at the last forecast here there, we calculate what we call the terminal value, TV. All right. So for the free cash flow, right? The free cash flow then becomes, of course, we calculated our change in working capital loss. Next thing is the net income plus depreciation and amortization, right? Now plus capex. I think capex here plus capex here because capex is already an outflow here. Because you can see capex is already an outflow. So we cannot say minus capex again, otherwise it will become an inflow. So that is what it means. So it's an outflow here. I think it's only here that we are having it as an inflow. And that's quite surprising. I have to check what happens, what actually happened there, why we are having capex there as an inflow. Okay. Now, the next is plus interest. Okay, interest times 1 minus tax, which is this. So enter. Okay, so let's see what happened here for capex. So you look at our capex. Okay, so our capex is actually positive there because there you can see that we had let me see if there is no well. Okay, let's see. Okay, so it's actually correct. So there's no error. So there's an inflow there. Okay, meaning that we had additions. We had additions to how would I put it now? Because additions here is income as an inflow. So we had an outflow. We had an outflow of other non-current assets. So we had an outflow of other non-current assets, an outflow of investment. So what it then means is that we sold an investment, other non-current assets that is worth 316.2 million. So that is what it means. So if it is negative, it's an outflow, right? If it is positive, it's an inflow. So we must have sold an investment here. So that is why it's an outflow. For the ones that are negative, that's why it's an outflow, because we are collecting cash for selling the investment. But if we are making the investment, it will be negative, which means it's an outflow, because we'll be paying cash for acquiring more investment. Okay, so what then that means for our, what's it called? What then that means for our valuation here? Sorry. So what that means for our valuation here is at this point where we have the free cash flow. So we have to take note of this particular instance here. The formula here, okay, which is 215, okay, which is 215 has to the minus. All right, so this has to be minus. Okay, then we click on enter. So once we have that, that's fine. Then we can then copy this and then paste by formula here and drag here. So this is what we have, right? This is what we have. Now, the next thing we then have to calculate is the terminal value. So we have to calculate. Next thing is the terminal value. So what's the formula for terminal value? The formula for terminal value is simply the free cash flow. Okay, free cash flow at the terminal date. Now, the free cash flow at the terminal date is this. So this is free cash flow at the terminal date. I can put a column there, FCFF subscript. So FCFF okay, I actually want to do something here, but never mind. So FCFF subscript N. Okay. So the formula for the terminal value, okay, terminal value. So the formula for the terminal value PV equals, so first going to open a bracket, your FCFF in subscript, right, times I can have another bracket here. Okay, you can open a bracket 1 plus G, which is a growth rate, right? Close. So you divide it by weighted average cost of capital minus growth rate. Okay, so this gives you your so that gives you your terminal value. Okay, now remember that for us to be able to get the terminal value, of course, we must calculate our weighted average cost of capital. So that's what we have to do here now. We have to calculate our what? Weighted average cost of capital. So with this weighted average cost of capital that you will use to discount this free cash flow, because ultimately, if it's free cash flow, right? If free cash flow that we have here is what we are going to discount, we're going to discount this to the present value. Okay, we're going to discount this to the present value. Now, if we are discounting, sorry, I need to let you understand something, right? Let me remove those colors. Now, for the forecast period is what we are discounting, not the historical years. Please, this forecast period is what we're going to discount. Okay, let me, yes. So all this from here to here, including the one in green, including this one. I just have to shade this one in green to tell you that that is the terminal value of the free cash flow. So from here, including the one in green, we're going to discount it to the present value, right? So we're going to apply the weighted average cost of capital of the business to do that. Okay. Now, for us to calculate the weighted average cost of capital, the first thing we have to do is we need to get the equity value. Sorry. We need to get the equity value, and we need to get the debt value. So by getting the equity value, and we're also getting the debt value. So equity value, you go up, right? So you can pick the immediate historical year. Okay. Pick the immediate historical year for equity value. Immediate historical year for equity value is 676.9. Immediate historical year for debt value, which is going to be the short-term debt plus the long-term debt, right? Is this. Sorry, this shouldn't be formatted in percentage. So we have to format in numbers. Okay. Yeah. So that's the first thing you do, right? So once you do that, the next thing is to now get this in percentage. So you have to get the equivalent percentage value by saying this, take this, divide it by the addition of this plus this, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to fix this, fix this, fix this, and fix this, and press enter. So with that, I can take this down exactly. So you see what happens there. So these are the composition of the capital structure. So the composition of the capital structure is 67% equity and 33% debt. So the next thing we're then going to have is to get so this one is the capital composition. Of course, here we're going to have the cost of debt and cost of equity, KE and AD. Okay, cost of debt and cost of equity. So first is our KE, next is our KD. Okay, so for our cost of debt, if you look at it in the assumption, sorry, cost of equity. So if you look at it in the assumption, we'll be told that return on equity is 15%. So our cost of equity is what we're going to pay our equity, is what our equity owners will get. So we don't have to waste our time now. So we have been given as 15%. Now, of course, if you're not giving, you know the formula to calculate that. The formula to calculate that is your dividend per share. Your cost of equity is your dividend per share over market price per share times G, which is the growth rate. And you know how to get this, your growth rate. So your growth rate is, you can use the Gordon's model, RB, or you can use the dividend growth model. So all these ones are strategic financial management related. So you need to revise your SFM, strategic financial management, because the knowledge of SFM is relevant here. Okay, now for cost of debt. So your cost of debt, of course, your cost of debt is tax adjusted, right? It's tax adjusted, so it's straightforward, right? And if you even look at it here, something that we have even calculated already. You understand? So it's 13.79 because we've calculated it already. So you have the interest as this, and you have the 1 minus tax rate as 65%. I have this as, so you don't have to waste time. So the after tax cost of debt is 13.79. Okay, so this is the same thing as 0.15. Okay, so 0.15, 13.79. So therefore, Therefore, our work is then going to be the equity value times cost of equity plus the debt value in bracket. The debt value times cost of it. Okay. 461. Okay. All right. So that is what we have there. Okay. So here, now here is what we're going to use. So that value is what we're going to use. So this value is extremely high. So I don't know. I think it's, let's just be sure that the formula is fine. So this is what we have. Okay. This times this is fine. Cost of equity times this. Cost of equity, composition of equity times cost of equity, composition of debt times the cost of debt. Okay, yeah, I think we don't have a problem. So for our cost of debt, the cost of debt, okay, so let me see. Now this cost of debt, what we are using here for what's it called? For the interests. Okay, so let's pick that as well in the same period we use for, because for this we use what's it called? We use 2002, which is the immediate prior year, right? So if you look at the what's it called? The historical financial statement, okay, the cost of debt we had there for the immediate prior year, which is here, is what? Uh, which is here is what? Is 15.41. So 15.41 can be used here just for uniformity. 15 point. Okay. Yeah. Oh, please. Sincere apologies for this. I know where the issue is coming from. So this should actually be the interest rates and not the interest. Okay, it should be the interest rate. Please, apologies for that. I know where the issue is coming from. Please. So it should be the interest rate and not the interest. This should be interest. So the need to revise these basic things is very important. Otherwise, we'll mix them up. Okay. Now the interest rate for short-term debt is 7%. Okay. The interest rate for long-term debt, we are told that the actual interest is 13.5, but that's not the rate. Okay. Yeah, that's not the rate. So the rate for long-term debt, so what we're then going to have is, we're going to say equals to, right? So we're going to say equals to the rate for short-term debt is 7%, okay, plus the rate for long-term debt is going to be, we'll open a bracket, I would say the 13.5 we have here divided by long-term debt in 2002 is 218.1. Then we close, then enter. Yes, so we have 0.1. So it makes sense now. We're going to be having 400 and something percent. So I just know my insights, just that is absolutely incorrect. Okay, 14% is what we have. 14%. That's the weighted average cost of capital. So is this 14%? So is this 14%, right, that we are going to use to calculate our terminal value? But before then, one thing we also need to get our terminal value is what's it called? Is the G, which is the growth rate, right? So most often times the growth rate is for the purpose of valuation, DCF approach be an assumption. Will be an assumption either, and it's always between the range of 1 to 5%. So majorly it's based on the GDP of the country, the growth in the GDP and inflation rate. So it's always between the range of 1 to 5%. So you can just look at the growth rate of the GDP and inflation rate and assume based on the growth rates, do you get the range, the number you're going to use between 1 to 5%. So, so let's then say our G okay. Now this G is the TV I'll zoom this so that I can see what I've written there. So that G is the TV. So the G is the TV applicable. The TV is the G is the TV applicable growth rate. Okay, the G. So I want to bold all this. So the G is the TV applicable growth rate. Okay, so here then, okay, we can then calculate our terminal value. Now, the reason why we are calculating terminal value is because you cannot continue to forecast to perpetuity. So you need to get a terminal value. So the terminal value is an estimate of the forecast free cash flow. So it gives you an average of what the estimate of the forecast free cash flow will be, because a business is a going concern. As a going concern, what that means is that business will continue to operate to perpetuity, but we cannot continue to forecast to perpetuity. So we need to get something that will represent what the future cash flow will be, and that's the terminal value. So it's an estimate of what the future cash flow will be beyond the forecast period. So that's the definition of terminal value. So here now, our terminal value then becomes the free cash flow times. You have to open a bracket. Okay. Now, here we need to assume a G factor, let's say 2%. So this, okay. So pick that times, we open a bracket, 1 plus. So I don't want to type 2% here because I have to link it to this. So this can be included, fine, because it's an assumption. So this is picked here, right? Close it, okay? Close it. Then you divide this. Before then, you can put everything. Okay. Then divide it. Then go and pick your work. Open another bracket. Pick your work and remove the G. Exactly. So this is the terminal value. This is the average of what the forecast would be beyond 2007. So if you have 2008 to infinity, this is the average of all of them to infinity. Okay. Now you can say this down here, but for this, it's going to be this plus. All right. So that settles that. The next thing we are then going to do is to then calculate the enterprise value. Now, the enterprise value is equals to the net present value, okay? The net present value of the free cash flow, all right? So net present value of the free cash flow discounted at the weighted average cost of capital. So what you're going to do is you're going to pick, you can see there's a syntax here. So the rate here is the WACC, and then what you're then going to pick again is the entire value from here for the forecast period, please. From here to here. Not from here to here, from forecast period. Because you're getting present value of future cash flow, not what you know it is already. Not the cash flow you know that is past, it's future cash flow. Okay, so present value of future value. Next. So you pick all this and you press enter. So 3364.94 is the enterprise value. Okay, so this is the value of the enterprise, but not the equity value. Okay, so for you to get the equity value, we here talk about cash and talk about debt. Okay, so you have to add cash and less debt. Now, the cash you want to add is the cash and cash equivalent in the cash and cash equivalent in the immediate prior year. Cash and cash equivalent in the immediate prior year is 28.4. And the debt you want to subtract is the debt in the immediate prior year both long and short term. This was this. Okay, and we treat it as negative, which I'm subtracting. So we have equity value. Yeah. Now, so this equity value is the value of the business. So the value of the business is 3.064 million. So that is the figure I'm looking for, enterprise value. Now, then another value you may want to calculate in case you have numbers of shares outstanding. Do we have that in the assumption? Okay, will remain unchanged. But we don't know if you are given numbers of shares outstanding. We are told that it will remain unchanged. It will remain unchanged. Okay, so let's just say you have numbers of shares outstanding of 2,000 or 200. So if we assume that this is numbers of shares outstanding, then equity value share is going to be the enterprise value divided by the numbers of shares outstanding. So 15.32 is equity value per share, or you can call it fair value per share. So in case you want to know, so don't actually know the fair value per share for this business. The fair value is the, of course, you know what the definition of fair value is based on the financial reporting. The value that an asset can be sold or transacted at the arm's length and an arm's length transaction between two parties on an agreed date at an agreed period. So in case this business wants to be traded, the fair value per the share that can be traded for is 15.32, 15 naira 32 kobo, while the equity value, in case somebody wants to buy this business or whatever thing, maybe merger and acquisition, stuff like that, stuff like that, the equity value is 3064.994. So you can see this whole model is, you can see everything that we have done so far is actually dynamic, makes sense, because if I change anything, if I come here and come and change anything, it's going to affect everything down to the fair value of the business, the what's it called? The enterprise value, okay? The enterprise value and the equity value. Okay, so for instance, if we change this forecasting factor now, let's just do some tests here. So 15%. So we had it before at 5%. Let's say for 15%. Let's see what happens. And see that our equity value or fair value per share changed to 25.61. equity value increased because, of course, when we increase the forecast of the revenue, it's a positive effect on the business, right? So because a positive effect on the business is going to have a positive effect on the value of that business, and that's why the equity value is high. Equity value is high. What was the equity value before? Now it is what? 5122, isn't it? So all this one is just I'm just trying to test the logic of our model to be sure that it makes sense. Or anything that you are doing that does not make sense should not be done. So if we come and change it back to 5%, I want to know the value that was there before. And that's what I'm doing on this. So if you come back and change this one to 5%, you can see that the whole thing is just changing because it's linked. Cash flow, everything, blah, blah, blah. It's just changing because we have linked everything. So the value, you can see, the value was 3. See what happens there now. See what happens. So having a higher, what's it called? Having a higher revenue forecast is actually increasing, will actually increase the value of the business, which makes sense. So because it was high by 10%, I guess, I believe from 5 to 15, that's 10%. So equity value went up by 2057, and the fair value of the business went up by 10.29. Now, what if we have the SGA? Okay, so what if we have the SG and A here to, let's say, 40%. So we had it before at 29%. Now we are taking it to 40%. So what happens to the value of the business? Remember, it was 29, now it's 40. And the value of the business went down, right? So you can see the value of the business went down. Okay, so let's see. We had this before at 29%. So when we had it at 29%, the value is this, isn't it? This. It's already here. Just want to keep track of that. So let's play with something. We have this as 40%. The value is now this. $3.5, but the equity value is now this. So what happens there? So you see that what's it called? The equity value went up, actually went up. Okay, the equity value went up. Okay, equity value went up, but the equity value per share or the fair value went down. Okay, so ultimately, this matters, right? Even though the equity value went up, even as we had the forecast period. For the forecast period, the SG and A went up by 40%. Okay, the basis on which we computed all this. Okay, you can see the period for those forecast period. We are still having we are still making a profit because The profit is, everything here is positive. Let me play with something more. Let's say it's 50% here. So if it's 50%, what happens? 50%, you see what happens there? Equity value, okay, equity value, this actually still went up, and this went, was it up now or down? I think this went down also, or it went up. All right, so those are just the different scenarios. Meanwhile, you should note that it's not only the effects of this forecast period that will be affecting your enterprise value. We also take into cognizance the investments the business has in fixed assets, which is your capex movement and all the rest. Your working capital, all those things will have effect because they all contribute to what makes up your equity value. But what we are only dealing with here is we have been dealing with the income statement elements. The effects of the income statement elements, whatever thing we are dealing with here, only has one output, which is the bottom line. And the bottom line is profit after tax. And is that profit after tax we have taken into cognizance here? If you look at it, the net income. So that's just the effect. So the only thing, whatever thing we are changing there, the only thing is affecting is this, right? So it's affecting this. But what about all the other? What about all the other variables there? So all these other variables will also have an impact on the equity and enterprise value. So thank you very much. In case you have a question, please do ask. So what we're just going to do is for the class later this evening is just for me to answer your question. So I expect that you should go through this lecture. Okay. So if you have any issue with this lecture, which is very important, I must say, because this lecture is a requirement for you to be able to understand merger and acquisition and other advanced financial models. So thank you very much for your time. I'm going to send you this. Thank you.